The morning sun crept gently across the quiet neighborhood in Boulder, Colorado, while Margaret, 55 and single, sat by her kitchen window. The silence in her home had grown heavy over the years, pressing into her mornings with invisible weight. She stirred her coffee slowly, listening only to the ticking clock and her own sighs. Once, her days had been filled with laughter and plans, but now, they seemed stretched thin and hollow. She wondered if change was still possible at her age. Her friends often spoke of retirement, grandchildren, or traveling with spouses, but Margaret's life followed no such script. She had built a career, watched it fade, and found herself alone in a house that no longer felt alive. Her heart longed for something undefined, a spark she had misplaced long ago. She didn't crave comfort as much as meaning, something to remind her she still had purpose. The idea of a new beginning tugged faintly at her. That morning, her eyes wandered to the distant silhouette of the Rocky Mountains. They had always been there, a majestic backdrop she rarely explored, yet suddenly they seemed to call her name. The peaks glowed with possibility, shimmering under the rising light. A thought emerged, fragile yet persistent. Perhaps walking among those mountains could help her breathe again. She felt her heart stir, quietly at first. Then, with a steady pulse of curiosity, she searched a drawer and pulled out an old map. The paper creased and worn from years untouched. Trails snaked across the page, promising paths unknown, each line whispering of challenge and renewal. Margaret traced one with her finger, imagining herself moving through pine forests and rocky slopes. The thought filled her with both fear and anticipation. She had never been a hiker, but maybe it was time to try. Pulling on her sneakers, she felt a flutter of courage she hadn't known in years. They were not hiking boots, but they would be enough for today. She packed a bottle of water and an apple, her preparation simple but symbolic. Every movement felt like resistance against the silence that had ruled her life. Each step she planned was a promise to herself. I will not remain stuck. Outside, the cool air wrapped around her like a gentle embrace. She walked slowly at first, past houses and gardens, her legs stiff but determined. The mountains loomed larger with every glance upward, steady and inviting. With each breath, she felt a hint of resilience returning to her body. Like an old friend rediscovered, she whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning." As she returned home from that first modest walk, a sense of accomplishment lit her spirit. It wasn't much, but it was something, her first step toward hope. Margaret opened her journal, untouched for months, and wrote a single line. "Today, I began." She underlined it twice, her hand trembling with quiet excitement. Tomorrow, she promised, she would try again, this time aiming for the foothills. The mountain was waiting. The following morning, Margaret woke with a nervous energy coursing through her veins. The air outside was crisp, the kind of September morning that smelled faintly of pine and earth. She dressed in layers, unsure what to expect, and tucked her journal into her bag. Today was not just another walk through her neighborhood. It was her first true attempt to meet the mountain. She felt both afraid and strangely alive. She drove to the trailhead, gripping the wheel with clammy hands. Other hikers moved easily, boots laced tight, backpacks secured with confidence. Margaret, in her sneakers and old windbreaker, felt out of place among them. Yet she reminded herself this wasn't about appearances. It was about courage. She parked, inhaled deeply, and told herself she belonged here too. The gravel beneath her feet crunched as she took her first uncertain steps. The trail greeted her with a gentle incline, winding through tall grasses swaying in the wind. Each step carried a mixture of effort and relief, her lungs adjusting slowly to the change in rhythm. She had forgotten how healing fresh air could feel, the way it seeped into her chest and pushed out the heaviness. With every breath, a little more of her loneliness dissolved. This was harder than she imagined, but also more beautiful. As she climbed, her body began to protest. Her calves tightened, her heart raced, and doubt whispered that she wasn't strong enough. Margaret slowed her pace, focusing on steady breathing, counting her steps to distract herself. The mountain was teaching her patience, demanding persistence one stride at a time. She realized that progress didn't need to be fast, it only needed to be forward. She smiled through the challenge, proud she hadn't turned back. Midway up, she paused on a wooden bench carved into the hillside. From there, she could see rooftops shrinking below and mountains stretching endlessly ahead. The horizon, wide and untouchable, filled her with awe. Margaret pulled out her apple, biting into its sweetness as if it were a reward. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of connection to something greater than herself. The silence here was not heavy, it was healing. Other hikers passed, some nodding politely, others offering encouragement. One woman, perhaps close to her own age, smiled warmly and said, "Beautiful day for a first hike, isn't it?" Margaret chuckled, unsure how the stranger knew, but the words comforted her. She realized she wasn't truly alone. Everyone on the trail carried their own story, their own reasons for walking. The thought filled her heart with a new kind of belonging. By the time she reached the end of the trail and returned to her car, Margaret was exhausted yet radiant. Her sneakers were muddy, her muscles sore, but her spirits soared higher than the peaks. She opened her journal again and wrote, "I didn't quit." It was a small declaration, but one that mattered deeply. Tomorrow, she promised, she would climb higher. Hope was no longer a distant dream, it was becoming a companion. The next day began with heavy clouds hanging low over the mountains, their gray edges blending into the horizon. Margaret hesitated at first, wondering if the weather was a warning to stay home. But something inside her insisted she go, that resilience was not built only in sunshine. She filled her bottle, packed a light rain jacket, and whispered a quiet promise to herself. "I can do this," she said, stepping out into the mist. At the trailhead, the cool air tightened her chest before she even began. The path rose steeply almost immediately, demanding more than she thought she could give. She tried to match her breath with her steps, inhaling deeply and exhaling slowly. Her lungs protested, sharp and insistent, yet she refused to turn back. Each breath became both her battle and her victory. Halfway up the incline, she stopped to rest, leaning on her knees, sweat mixing with the drizzle. Her legs trembled, her heart pounded, but her spirit pushed against the discomfort. She remembered the years she had lived quietly, avoiding challenges to keep life comfortable. This struggle, though painful, felt different. It felt alive. With trembling hands, she steadied herself and kept climbing. A gust of wind swept through the trees, carrying the sharp scent of pine. Margaret closed her eyes for a moment, letting the wind cool her damp skin. Something shifted within her, as though the mountain was reminding her to be present, to breathe, not just for survival but for renewal. She opened her eyes and smiled, the weight in her chest easing slightly. The struggle was teaching her patience. Further up, she met an older man coming down the trail, his face weathered but kind. "Hard part's almost over," he said encouragingly. "Just keep your rhythm." His words struck her like a gentle blessing, simple yet powerful. Encouraged, she straightened her back and adjusted her pace, focusing less on speed and more on flow. With every careful step, her breathing steadied into a quiet harmony. When she finally reached a small clearing, the view opened unexpectedly, a valley stretching endlessly, dotted with tiny homes and winding roads. Margaret sank onto a rock, her chest still heaving but her heart swelling with pride. She had made it through the hardest stretch, and the mountain rewarded her with beauty she would have missed if she had quit. She took out her journal and wrote, "Breath is the bridge." The descent was slippery, her sneakers caked in mud, but she laughed at the mess rather than curse it. Each misstep became a reminder that resilience wasn't about perfection but recovery. By the time she returned to her car, the drizzle had turned into light rain. She sat behind the wheel, wet and exhausted, yet filled with quiet triumph. Tomorrow, she thought, she would aim even higher. The mountain had more to teach her. The morning sun broke through after a night of steady rain, and Margaret felt a burst of gratitude for the clear sky. She chose a popular trail this time, curious about the people she might meet along the way. Though she valued solitude, a part of her longed for connection, for voices that could blend with the rustle of the forest. She packed her water, her apple, and her journal, then set off with cautious optimism. At the trailhead, she noticed hikers greeting each other like old friends. Their laughter carried into the air, softening the silence that usually clung to her mornings. Margaret adjusted her jacket and began walking, her steps tentative at first. Soon, a woman in her 50s fell into pace beside her, complimenting her bright scarf. They shared a smile, and suddenly the trail felt warmer. As they climbed, conversations flowed like streams crossing the path. A retired teacher cracked jokes about his slow pace, drawing laughter from the group around him. "Progress is progress," he said with a grin, and Margaret nodded, her heart lightened by his words. She realized that every hiker carried a story, and today she was walking inside a small tapestry of them. At a scenic overlook, the group naturally gathered, exchanging snacks and sips of water. Margaret, shy at first, offered pieces of her apple, and the gesture was met with gratitude. As they spoke about their favorite trails and experiences, she felt a connection blooming. This wasn't just about walking through nature, It was about belonging to something bigger. Purpose peeked through the leaves, subtle but undeniable. Later, one woman hesitated at the steep descent, her hands trembling slightly. Margaret, surprised by her own confidence, stepped forward. Short steps, steady breathing. "I'll walk with you," she encouraged. Together they navigated the tricky slope, each careful stride building trust. By the bottom, the woman hugged her, whispering thanks. Margaret felt a spark of courage she hadn't known before she could help others. The group dispersed at the parking lot, exchanging cheerful goodbyes. Margaret lingered, watching them drive away, a smile stretching across her face. For years, she had believed she was meant to walk her path alone. Today, she discovered the joy of walking alongside others, of sharing struggles and triumphs. Her heart felt less heavy, her spirit more open. Connection had found her on the mountain. Driving home, the road seemed brighter, the trees taller, the sky wider. An idea began to stir, quiet yet persistent. What if she gathered people intentionally, not just by chance? What if walks like today became something more regular, more purposeful? The thought settled into her chest like a seed waiting to grow. Tomorrow, she would explore this idea further. The mountain was whispering of something new. Margaret woke before dawn, her heart stirring with anticipation she hadn't felt in years. The air was cool and crisp as she packed a thermos of tea, a small snack, and her journal. Today, she aimed higher, determined to watch the sunrise from a mountaintop. As she drove through the quiet streets, the horizon blushed faintly with promise. The mountains seemed to call her by name. The trail began in soft twilight. The ground cool beneath her shoes and the air still heavy with night. Birds stirred in the trees, their gentle songs guiding her forward like a blessing. She walked in steady rhythm, each breath filling her lungs with purpose. The incline was steep, yet she found herself embracing the challenge. With every step, courage grew stronger inside her chest. As the climb grew rocky, doubt crept in again. Her legs ached, her lungs strained, and her thoughts whispered of turning back. But she remembered her journal's words, "I didn't quit." With renewed determination, she leaned on that small promise and pressed forward. She counted her steps, breaking the climb into smaller victories. Slowly, she made her way toward the summit. When she finally reached the top, the world opened wide before her. The horizon blazed with shades of orange and gold, painting the sky in fire and hope. Margaret stood still, her breath catching not from exhaustion but from awe. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling freely as she whispered thanks into the wind. This was not emptiness, it was renewal. The silence around her was no longer heavy but alive, filled with meaning. She sipped her tea as the sun rose higher, warming her face and softening her spirit. In that moment, she felt a profound connection to the earth, the sky, and herself. She realized the mountain was not only a place of struggle, but also of healing. The horizon promised her new beginnings. On the way down, she considered how these walks were slowly reshaping her life. What began as therapy for loneliness was becoming a source of purpose. She imagined what it would be like to share this experience with others regularly. Perhaps she could invite a few people to join her next weekend. The thought filled her with both fear and excitement. By the time she reached her car, the idea had rooted deeply. Margaret scribbled into her journal, "Maybe I could lead walks." The words looked bold on the page, larger than her usual handwriting. For the first time in years, she felt she was not just moving forward but growing into something new. Tomorrow, she would begin planning. The horizon had given her direction. The following Sunday, Margaret arrived early at the trailhead, her heart racing with nervous energy. She had posted a small note on a community board, "Slow Hike Sundays, beginners welcome." To her surprise, 3 people had signed up. As she waited by her car, dark clouds gathered overhead, threatening to undo her fragile courage. She wondered if she had made a mistake soon. A young mother with a bright smile appeared, followed by 2 older friends, both carrying modest backpacks. Their faces were open but uncertain, mirroring Margaret's own feelings. She greeted them warmly, her voice steadier than she expected. "Thank you for coming," she said, hiding the doubt swirling inside. Together, they turned toward the path, ready to see what the day would bring. The first stretch of trail was slick with pine needles, made more treacherous by the drizzle beginning to fall. Margaret's chest tightened. She had not planned for rain, but she steadied herself and encouraged the group with simple words, short steps, slow and steady. Her instructions gave them confidence, and soon the rhythm of their movement created a shared calm. Progress emerged in their careful pace. Halfway through, the drizzle became steady rain, and one of the friends looked ready to quit. Margaret scanned the trail and spotted a sheltered outcrop nearby. Leading them there, she offered tea from her thermos and passed around a small pack of cookies. Laughter broke through the tension as they shared the simple snack. The storm no longer felt like a threat but a test they had passed together. As the rain eased, the group resumed their walk with renewed energy. Their steps were stronger now, and even the hesitant one moved with greater ease. Margaret felt pride swell in her chest, not just for herself, but for the resilience she saw in others. She realized she wasn't only walking for her own healing anymore. She was helping others find theirs too. When they returned to the trailhead, damp and smiling, the young mother asked, "Will you do this again next week?" Margaret hesitated only for a moment before answering, "Yes, I will." The words surprised her with their firmness. Something new had taken root in her heart, a sense of responsibility. She wasn't just leading a hike, she was nurturing hope. That evening, Margaret dried her wet shoes by the fireplace and opened her journal. She wrote, "Rain did not stop us." Below it, she added, "Maybe I was meant to lead." Closing the book, she felt a quiet certainty. Tomorrow, she would design a flyer for more hikes. The mountain was no longer just her refuge, it was becoming her purpose. Margaret spent the week preparing carefully for her next group hike. She printed simple flyers with the words "Breathe, Walk, Renew" and posted them in coffee shops and libraries. By Sunday, 7 people showed up, more than she ever expected. Nervous but proud, she greeted them with warmth. The circle of faces felt like the beginning of something real. Before stepping onto the trail, Margaret explained her philosophy. Slow is strong. Listen to your body, encourage one another. Her voice shook slightly, but the group listened attentively. She carried her journal in her pack, a reminder that these walks were not just about movement but about meaning. Each person nodded, ready for the journey. She felt the mountain waiting for them. The trail began with a steep grade, quickly testing everyone's endurance. A few hikers struggled, their breathing uneven and steps unsteady. Margaret paused, pointing to a large rock ahead. "Let's just reach that one together," she said, breaking the challenge into smaller goals. When they arrived, she chose another marker further on. Progress became a series of tiny victories, building resilience step by step. As the group advanced, laughter and encouragement filled the air. One woman confessed, "I usually quit when it gets hard." Margaret replied gently, "But you didn't today." The simple exchange sparked smiles across the group. They were learning that strength was not about perfection but persistence. Each stumble, each pause, carried its own lesson. The mountain was teaching all of them. At the overlook, Margaret pulled out small slips of paper she had prepared. "Write 5 words about how you feel," she instructed. Some wrote, "strong, steady, proud, hopeful, alive." Others wrote, "tired, but not defeated." Reading them aloud, they discovered reflections of themselves in each other's words. Hope shimmered in the air, weaving their experiences together. The descent was easier, filled with conversation and gentle laughter. Margaret noticed how different the group looked from when they had started. Shoulders higher, steps lighter, faces brighter. She realized these hikes were transforming not just her, but everyone involved. The mountain was a classroom, and resilience was its lesson. She felt gratitude swelling within her. That evening, Margaret wrote in her journal, "I am becoming a guide." The words frightened her, yet they also filled her with purpose. She was no longer only chasing healing for herself, she was helping others discover it too. Closing the book, she whispered, "Thank you, Mountain." Tomorrow, she would design journals for the group. During the week, Margaret created simple journals with prompts. What did I feel today? Where did I struggle? What gave me hope? She photocopied enough for everyone and tucked them into her bag. When the group gathered again, she handed them out. Curious smiles spread as they flipped through the pages. This small gift made the hike feel more intentional. "Take 5 minutes before and after we walk," she explained. "Write what comes to mind. There are no wrong answers." Some hesitated, others eagerly began scribbling. Margaret felt a surge of pride at their willingness to reflect. This was more than exercise, it was becoming a practice of self-discovery. The mountain was turning into their sanctuary. The trail that day wound through groves of aspen trees, their golden leaves trembling like coins in the breeze. Sunlight filtered through, painting everything in soft, shifting light. The beauty lifted their spirits, carrying them forward with ease. Margaret walked at the center, guiding with a balance of caution and joy. She felt hope weaving through the group like golden threads. Halfway through, a small creek blocked their path. Its rocks were slick, the water rushing just enough to intimidate. The group hesitated, but Margaret stepped forward first. "One rock at a time," she instructed, moving carefully. Her confidence gave them courage, and soon they crossed, cheering as they reached the other side. Resilience looked like wet boots and wide smiles. On the far bank, Margaret suggested they pause to write. Pens scratched across paper, capturing emotions raw and fresh. One person wrote, "I did something I thought I couldn't." Another, "Fear left me on that rock." Margaret's own words came easily. Strength grows when shared. The journals became small mirrors, reflecting back their progress. Afterward, they circled together, reading aloud what they chose to share. Vulnerability filled the space, yet so did encouragement. The group was no longer just hikers, they were becoming a community. Margaret listened with tears threatening her eyes, moved by how deeply people trusted the process. The mountain was shaping not only her journey but theirs as well. That evening, she added another line to her personal journal. "The mountain gives more when we give together." She realized she was no longer just leading hikes, she was guiding hearts. Tomorrow, she planned to invite a guest to share knowledge with the group. Something told her the journey was only just beginning. Margaret wanted to give her group more than walks, so she reached out to a local physiotherapist to speak about balance and pacing. When Wednesday evening arrived, the group gathered at the trailhead, buzzing with curiosity. Among the familiar faces was someone new, a tall man with silver hair and kind eyes, holding a hiking pole. He introduced himself simply as Daniel, explaining he had seen the flyer. Margaret smiled politely, unaware of the role he would soon play. The physiotherapist guided the hikers through ankle strengthening, drills and posture exercises. Laughter filled the air when people wobbled, and Daniel chuckled warmly, steadying a woman nearby. Margaret noticed his calm presence and the ease with which he encouraged others. She found herself watching him longer than she intended, curious about this newcomer who blended so naturally into the group. Something about his energy felt grounding. After the exercises, they began their evening hike under a golden sky. Margaret walked at the front, but Daniel soon caught up beside her. "You're the leader?" he asked with genuine interest. She nodded, suddenly aware of how unusual this felt to be seen in this role by someone new. "You're doing something wonderful here," he added, his tone sincere. The words warmed her more than she expected as the trail curved through the forest. Margaret listened to the group's chatter behind her. She noticed Daniel adjusting his pace to match hers, his stride steady and patient. They spoke casually at first about trails, weather, and favorite mountain views, but soon, their conversation deepened into stories of why they both came here. Margaret admitted she had started walking as a way to heal. Daniel quietly nodded, saying he understood. At the overlook, the group admired the fading light as the physiotherapist wrapped up the session. Margaret passed out journals for reflections, and Daniel accepted his with a smile. He wrote quickly, then folded the page before tucking it away. She wondered what words he had chosen but did not ask. For the first time in a long while, curiosity about someone else stirred inside her. On the descent, Daniel offered to walk at the back with her, ensuring everyone stayed safe. His presence was steady, reassuring, without being intrusive. Margaret realized she felt lighter with him nearby. As if the responsibility of leading didn't rest solely on her shoulders anymore. It was subtle, but the support was unmistakable. She found herself grateful for his quiet company. Back at the trailhead, as the group dispersed, Daniel lingered for a moment. "Thank you," he said softly, meeting her eyes. "This was exactly what I needed." Margaret felt her chest tighten. Not from nerves, but from recognition something was shifting. Driving home, she replayed his words, wondering why they mattered so much. Tomorrow, she promised, she would see where this path might lead. Saturday arrived with clear skies, and Margaret prepared for a longer hike with the group. She checked her backpack twice: water, first aid, journals, radios, her leadership now seasoned and confident. When she reached the trailhead, Daniel was already there, greeting others with ease. He waved at her, his smile genuine, and she felt an unexpected flutter. For the first time in years, she wondered if the mountain was offering her more than healing. The trail was demanding. Climbing steeply through rocky Margaret led the way, calling out reminders for short strides and steady breathing. Daniel walked nearby, sometimes helping those who stumbled, his patience evident. She noticed how naturally he encouraged others, his calm voice blending with the rhythm of footsteps. It felt as though he had always been part of the circle. She admired how seamlessly he fit. At a resting point, the group gathered to catch their breath. One hiker laughed, saying, "You two make a great team." Margaret flushed slightly, surprised by the comment, but Daniel only smiled. He looked at her with a glimmer of kindness that lingered longer than casual. She turned toward the horizon, her heart racing faster than the climb had demanded. Something new was stirring within her. Reaching the summit, the group fell silent, awestruck by the panoramic view. Margaret stood beside Daniel, sipping tea from her thermos. For a moment, they shared the silence without speaking, yet it felt full of meaning. When she glanced at him, he was watching the horizon with the same quiet reverence she felt. It was not romance, it was recognition. Two souls meeting on common ground. During the descent, a younger hiker twisted her ankle. Margaret hurried to help, but Daniel was already there, guiding the woman gently to sit. Together, they stabilized her, offering water and reassurance. The group watched in admiration as leader and newcomer worked side by side. Margaret realized then how natural their partnership felt, built not on words but actions. The mountain had quietly paired them by the time they reached the parking lot. The injured hiker was laughing again, supported by friends. The group dispersed with smiles and gratitude, but Daniel lingered. "You handled that beautifully," he said, his voice low and sincere. Margaret felt warmth bloom inside her, not just from his words, but from the unspoken bond growing between them. She thanked him, her smile softer than usual. That evening, Margaret opened her journal and wrote, "The mountain gives more than I asked for." Her hand trembled as she underlined the sentence twice. She didn't know where this path with Daniel might lead, but she felt open in a way she hadn't for years. Hope, once only about healing, now whispered of companionship. Tomorrow, she thought, the journey would reveal more. After weeks of guiding groups, Margaret felt the need for solitude. On a crisp Monday morning, she decided to walk alone, leaving her phone behind for once. The mountains stretched out before her, quiet and welcoming. Without the voices of others, she could hear only her breath and the steady rhythm of her steps. It felt like returning to the beginning. The trail was narrow and steep, demanding more focus than usual. Margaret's legs burned with effort, but she welcomed the challenge. Solitude had a way of sharpening her awareness. Every bird call, every rustle of leaves felt vivid. She realized how much she had grown since her first shaky steps weeks ago. Strength now lived in her body as well as her spirit. Memories surfaced as she climbed. Years of loneliness, moments when she doubted her worth, the quiet meals at her kitchen table. But instead of sadness, she felt compassion for the woman she had been. The mountain had taught her patience, resilience, and the beauty of small progress. She whispered softly, "I'm proud of you," as though speaking to her past self. At the summit, she sat cross-legged on a flat rock, staring out at the endless expanse. The horizon was painted in shades of blue and gold, stretching beyond imagination. She felt a deep connection, as if the mountains were whispering their wisdom directly into her heart. Her solitude was not emptiness but peace. For the first time, she felt whole on her own. Yet in the silence, she also found herself thinking of Daniel, his steady presence on the trail, his kindness when others faltered, the way his words carried warmth. Margaret smiled at the thought, though she quickly reminded herself not to hope too much. Still, the possibility lingered like the glow of the sun on the horizon. It was a gentle spark, not yet a flame. She pulled her journal from her pack and wrote, "Solitude is strength. Connection is grace." The words startled her with their honesty. She realized her journey was no longer just about surviving loneliness. It was about opening her heart, both to herself and to others. The mountain was showing her that healing and love could coexist. As she descended, Margaret felt lighter, as though the silence itself had restored her. She knew tomorrow she would rejoin her group, ready to guide again. But this solitary walk had given her clarity. She was not running from her past, but walking toward her future. And perhaps, just perhaps, that future might include companionship. The following Saturday, the group gathered for another hike, the air bright with early autumn sunlight. Margaret greeted each participant warmly, noticing how the circle had grown. People brought friends, siblings, even neighbors. The energy was light and welcoming, filled with chatter and laughter. Among them stood Daniel, his familiar presence grounding her instantly. She was surprised by how much she had missed his company. The trail wound gently through a meadow, where wildflowers still lingered despite the season. Margaret slowed the group, encouraging everyone to notice the details, the colors of petals, the hum of bees, the way sunlight danced on the grass. "The beauty of life hides in simple things," she said, her voice softer than usual. Heads nodded, smiles spread, and a calm silence settled over them. Daniel walked beside her again. Not rushing, not crowding, just matching her pace. They spoke quietly about the meadow, about books they both enjoyed, about small joys often overlooked. Margaret found herself laughing freely, surprised at how natural it felt. With him, conversation flowed like the stream nearby, steady, clear, refreshing. She sensed the group noticed, but no one said a word. Halfway through, they paused under a grove of aspens, their golden leaves shimmering like coins in the wind. Margaret invited the group to sit and write in their journals. Pens moved quickly, capturing gratitude and reflections. She glanced at Daniel, who wrote intently, his expression calm but thoughtful. She wondered what stories he carried, what dreams had brought him here. When sharing time came, one hiker read, "I found joy in a butterfly today." Another said, "I remembered I am stronger than I thought." Margaret listened with pride, her heart swelling with gratitude. This was what she had hoped for when she first imagined leading. Walks, moments of discovery hidden in the simple act of paying attention. The mountain was their teacher, and simplicity its lesson. On the way back, Daniel offered to carry part of her pack. Margaret declined at first, then smiled and let him. It was a small gesture, yet it stirred something within her, a reminder that allowing help could also be an act of strength. She realized she was learning not just to lead but also to share the weight. The lesson of simplicity extended even here. That evening, Margaret wrote in her journal, "The simple things carry the deepest truths." She thought of flowers, sunlight, laughter, and of Daniel's quiet kindness. Life transformation wasn't about grand changes, but about noticing what had been there all along. Tomorrow, she would prepare for the group's first retreat. The mountain was calling her towards something even greater. As autumn deepened, Margaret organized a community picnic after one of the weekend hikes. The meadow near the trailhead became a gathering place, filled with blankets, sandwiches, and laughter. People brought homemade food, guitars, and stories to share. Margaret moved among them, amazed at how her small idea had blossomed into something so vibrant. The sense of belonging warmed her heart. Daniel arrived carrying a basket of fresh bread he had baked himself. He placed it on the picnic table, smiling shyly when people praised its aroma. Margaret found herself drawn to him, curious about the man who gave so generously without expecting attention. They spoke briefly as they set out plates, their conversation easy and natural. For a moment, she forgot the weight of leadership. During the meal, hikers shared how the walks had changed their lives. One woman admitted she had been afraid to leave her house before joining. Another said she had rediscovered joy after years of routine. Margaret listened, her eyes misting with tears. She realized this wasn't just a group of hikers, it was a family of resilience and hope. The mountain had united them. After the picnic, Daniel sat beside her on a fallen log, watching the sunlight filter through the trees. "You've built something special here," he said, his voice steady. Margaret lowered her gaze, humbled by his words. "We built it," she corrected softly. He looked at her then, his eyes warm and sincere. The silence between them carried its own meaning. A local cafe owner approached Margaret, offering to sponsor the group with discounts for hikers. The idea of partnerships thrilled her. She could extend their circle of support even further. Daniel encouraged her to consider it, reminding her that growth could also mean sustainability. She appreciated his perspective, realizing he saw her vision clearly. It felt good to be understood. As the picnic ended, hikers packed up with hugs and promises to return next week. Margaret lingered, reluctant to let the day end. Daniel helped her fold blankets, their hands brushing briefly. The small touch startled her, yet it left behind a quiet warmth. She wasn't sure what it meant, but she didn't push it away. Some things were meant to unfold slowly. That evening, Margaret wrote in her journal, "Community is built step by step, like trails on a mountain." She thought of the stories she had heard, the laughter that still echoed in her mind, and Daniel's quiet presence beside her. Life transformation was no longer only her own, it belonged to everyone who walked with her. Tomorrow, she would take the next step forward. Margaret had been dreaming of a retreat, a weekend away where people could immerse themselves in walking, journaling, and reflection. With courage stirring in her chest, she visited a small lodge tucked near the base of the mountains. Its wooden beams and warm fireplaces felt inviting, the perfect place for renewal. She spoke with the owner, who welcomed the idea with enthusiasm. Her dream suddenly seemed possible. Back home, she reviewed logistics with meticulous care, Group size, safety plans, meals, and supplies, all details she wanted to honor. The thought of responsibility weighed heavily, but resilience steadied her. She reminded herself she had already built something real. Now it was time to let it grow. The retreat would be her boldest step yet. Daniel offered to help, surprising her with his willingness. He had experience organizing outdoor activities for local schools and knew the details that mattered. Together they drafted a scheduled morning hikes, afternoon workshops, evening circles by the fire. Working side by side, Margaret felt a rhythm form between them, as natural as their footsteps on the trail. She realized she trusted him. There were moments, brief but undeniable, when their eyes met longer than necessary. Margaret tried to dismiss them, afraid of reading too much into kindness, yet the feeling persisted, a quiet current beneath their planning. For years she had lived without expecting companionship. Now, possibility hovered like sunlight breaking through clouds. She wasn't ready to name it, but she felt it. As the retreat approached, the group's excitement grew. Spots filled quickly, emails buzzed with anticipation, and Margaret's nerves stretched taut. Daniel noticed her worry and reminded her gently, "You don't have to do this alone." His words sank deep, echoing in her chest. For once, she allowed herself to believe them. It was not weakness to accept support, it was strength. The night before the retreat, Margaret laid out journals, radios, and first aid kits in neat rows. She paused by the fireplace, staring at the flickering light, her heart full. She whispered, "This is bigger than me now." Courage rose within her like a tide, carrying her fears away. Tomorrow, she would step fully into the role she was meant to embrace. She wrote one final line in her journal before bed. "The mountain gave me purpose, and now it gives me people." Closing the book, she felt both humbled and ready. Somewhere in her heart, she also wondered if the mountain was giving her Daniel. She let the thought rest softly, like a seed planted in fertile soil. Tomorrow would reveal what was meant to grow. The retreat morning arrived with golden light spilling over the peaks, painting the lodge in warm hues. Guests gathered with bright eyes and eager smiles, their journals tucked under arms, their backpacks ready. Margaret greeted each one by name, her voice calm but vibrant with pride. For months she had dreamed of this moment, and now it was real. The mountains stood tall behind them, blessing their beginning. They started with gentle breathing exercises at dawn, a circle formed under the open sky. 7 counts in, 7 counts out. The rhythm of life itself filling their bodies. Silence wrapped around them, not heavy but sacred, carrying hope into the crisp morning air. Margaret watched faces relax, hearts open, and courage settle into their posture. This was what she had longed to create. The trail they chose was steady but forgiving, winding through golden aspens that shimmered like flames. Margaret led with care, Daniel walking nearby, quietly supporting those who needed extra encouragement. Together they guided the group with patience and kindness, their partnership as natural as the path beneath their feet. She noticed how the hikers trusted them both. It felt less like leading, more like belonging. At the overlook, they paused to journal, the view stretching endlessly before them. Words spilled from pens, promises, reflections, discoveries. Some wrote about strength, others about letting go, one about hope returning after years of absence. Margaret's own page read, "I have found my purpose." She underlined it twice, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. The mountain had given her what she thought she had lost forever. In the evening, they gathered by the fire inside the lodge, bowls of warm soup in hand. Laughter filled the room, stories weaving through the crackle of flames. Daniel sat beside her, their shoulders brushing lightly, their silence comfortable. When their eyes met, there was no rush, no pressure, only recognition. Margaret realized love could grow the same way trails are walked step by step, patiently, with trust. As night deepened, stars scattered across the sky outside the lodge. Margaret slipped out quietly, standing on the porch to breathe in the stillness. She thought of the woman she had been, lonely, uncertain, weighed down by silence. Now she stood strong, her life transformed by hope, resilience, and new beginnings. The mountain had not only healed hurt, had given her a future. She felt Daniel's presence before hearing his footsteps beside her. They stood together in quiet awe, watching the stars without words. Margaret smiled, her heart calm and open, ready for whatever paths awaited them both. She whispered to herself, 55 single, alive, and beginning again. Purpose anchored her like stone, yet her spirit soared like the mountain wind. Tomorrow would bring many more gentle steps,